today we're going to be graphing points on the coordinate plane. Let's start by talking a little bit about the coordinate plane. So, you see here a bunch of grid lines and two bold lines here. So what we have in the bold lines are our axes. Specifically, this one over here is our x-axis. And this one that runs up and down is the y-axis. That is important to remember. I had students one year, they came up with a little device for remembering this. They said that x is the same thing that you might draw on a cartoon when somebody is dead, ooh, for their eyes. And so X's mean you're dead, you're underground, so that one is like the ground, so it's horizontal. And they also said that Y goes up to the sky. If that helps you, great. It's weird enough to maybe stick in your brains. Terrific. All right, so that's the Y-axis. This is the X-axis. That's important to keep them straight. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to want to plot points on the X and Y axis. So when we're given data in a table, if it's given in a kind of vertical table, the numbers in the leftmost table are our X data, and in the right column, they are our Y data. That also corresponds to our independent variable and our dependent variable. So the graph always has the dependent variable going up and down and the independent variable going left and right. Terrific. So that data somehow has to make it onto this graph. So in order to do that, we need to give value to each of these lines. So we need a system that's going to count up to figure out a way to fit all these points in. So if we look at our x-axis, we start counting how many lines there are. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 lines across, and I've got to get up to 5 as my highest point on my x-axis. So I have plenty of lines here, but instead of just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the first 5 rows, I'm going to space them out a bit so that I can actually see the graph. I can get a little bit more information here. So I'm going to actually skip a few lines, put a 1 here, skip. Now, notice I skipped 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces for my 1. I'm going to do that again. 1, 2, 3, and here's going to be 2. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, here's going to be 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, there is 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5. Great. We spaced it out nice. While we're over here on the x-axis, let's label the x-axis for what it's describing. It is the number of classes. Great, that's an important label that we should have on our graph. Now let's look up and down at our y-axis. So notice we've got to get all the way up to 50 this time. Well, how many lines do we have to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if we've got 10 lines and we've got to get all the way up to 50, we can divide our 50 by our 10 lines and realize that each line must be worth at least 5. Now, I'm going to mark this one as 5, and this one is 10. Now, if you'd like, what you can do, keeping a consistent scale, I know this one would be 15 here, but I'm going to go ahead and just mark this as 20. If you skip every other marking, that will still be enough information for somebody to follow your graph quickly and easily. All right, 50 right there at the top. Let's also label this side. It's a little bit harder for me to write this on the tablet, but this is the minutes of homework. Great. We've got 2 of our important labels. The third label, before we get to actually plotting some points, is going to happen here at the top. That's going to be our title. Titles are boring. I know you might want to come up with some really awesome, super exciting titles like how terrible this homework is, oppressing you every night, but instead, let's just go ahead with a very boring title that's always Y data versus X data. Now, we're not going to just leave it as Y versus X. You're actually going to go ahead and steal the titles of your Y and your X data. So this graph is going to be minutes of homework versus classes. So it's Y versus X. It's dependent versus independent every time. That's going to be your title. Okay, we've labeled everything. We've put a title on. We've got nice consistent scales going on our axis. One thing I'll warn people of is sometimes I see students insert something called a break. The break in the data, especially for what we're going to be doing in this unit, is not a good idea. A break would be when you have an inconsistent scale to start your graph. So be careful that you don't do that. Don't put like, 1 here and then skip 2 lines the next time and put a 2 there. That would be an inconsistent scale. Now, notice on the y-axis and the x-axis, I have different scales from each other. That's totally acceptable. They don't have to be the same on each axis, but they have to be consistent within the axis itself. Okay, so as I said, x values are in the first column, so I get a 1 for x, y values in the second column, 10 for y. So 1 over on the x, up 10 on the y, we'll put a nice point there. We'll continue 2 on the x with 20 on the y. So 20 and 2, 3 and 30. 30 on the x, on the y, 3 on the x. 4 on the x and 40 on the y. 5 on the x, 50 on the y. We'll talk later about connecting the points, but right now nothing has told us that we need to connect the points. So we just have points graphed on this graph space, and that's all we're going to leave for this graph. So make sure you have all your labels, make sure you have a consistent scale, make sure you have a title, make sure you're careful on plotting the x versus the y and keeping those straight, and also make sure you don't make your graph so small. Notice I used all of the graph space. My points really filled them. You might not perfectly use all the graph space like all the way at the end, but you don't want a graph that lives like only in this corner of the graph and just wastes half your graph space. If you want to see another example, check out the next video. If you're good to go, keep practicing with the examples that are coming.